The reason we were number one in the world in so many categories for so long is because we put in the work it took to be number one. Now, we have so many other things to do. I mean, I got Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, and I got to play me some Halo, and I've got my iTunes I got to listen to, and Redbox, and I got to go shopping because I got to pick up this outfit. It was so cute. I got too much to do. Which is why, do you know the trend in the world today? The trend for 20 and 30-year-olds is when they finish high school to go back home and live with their parents. They don't go out and get a job. They want to go home and they want to play video games. They want to get on their computer. They want to text their friends, and mom and dad pay all the bills. The problem is we've lost the concept of what it means to work. And this is what we have to remember. You know what? What made us exceptional was the fact we were willing to work. We were going to put in what we need to do. We have to understand that's what it takes to be exceptional. The second thing I want to point to, hard work obviously, but the second thing is courage. Courage is being able to stand up for what's right even if you stand alone. Being willing to pay a price you need to pay, but courage, you stand up. One of the great examples I think of courage is Naphtali Daggett. Naphtali Daggett, he was a pastor, but he also was the president of Yale University. Well, up at Yale University, the British are coming toward New Haven, which is their town. And so the people of the town said, you know what, we got to get out of town. The British are coming to attack us. We have to get out of here. So the people start to pack up their stuff and try to leave town. The problem is the British are pretty much on top of them. So there's 100 men from the town that decide, you know what, we're going to go out on the hillside. We're going to set up a line of defense. We're going to open fire, try to hold the British off so you have enough time to get out of town. We're going to do what we can. So these 100 men go out and they set up. Well, Naphtali Daggett's one of the guys that goes. In fact, he passes the 100 men. Now, he's an old guy. He passes these 100 young men, and he goes and he sets up on top of this hillside in front of all the young men. Well, the British come. And the British, as they're coming, these 100 guys open fire, and they're having success for a little bit, but there's just so many British, they push these guys back. Well, Naphtali Daggett's up on this hill. The British push the men back, so he's left by himself. Well, he's not going to stop. The British are still coming, so he's just, his little single-shot loader, he's loading and he's shooting, and the British officer says, you know, every 2 or 3 minutes we heard a shot. And I was going to ignore it, except my men kept falling down dead. So I decided we better go figure out what's going on. So they went to where Naphtali Daggett was, and they saw, he said, I looked up and there was an old man on a hill. And I said, old man, what are you doing? And he said, I'm exercising my right of war. And the officer thought, that's pretty funny, this old guy up there, right of war. So the officer said, all right, old man, I get it. The officer said, if I let you go this time, you old rascal, will you ever fire again on the troops of His Majesty? Meaning, if I let you live, will you promise you won't shoot at us anymore? His response is incredible. He says, there's nothing more likely than that I keep shooting at you. That cost Naphtali Daggett his life. He was by himself, trying to give the townspeople time to get away, the women and children, where they're running. He's opposing the British. He's standing by himself. But he wasn't intimidated because he understood, you know what? I don't mind standing by myself. I know it's the right thing to do, and I'm going to stand here. You know what? You let me live. I'm going to keep doing it because I'm going to do the right thing, and that's courage.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. In several decisions over recent years, the Supreme Court has consistently ruled that it is unconstitutional for the government to encourage religion. Did our founding fathers agree with this? Consider the words of Henry Laurens, a signer of the Constitution and a president of Congress. Henry Laurens declared, I had the honor of being one who framed that Constitution. In order effectually to accomplish these great ends set forth in the Constitution, it is especially the duty of those who bear rule to promote and encourage respect for God and virtue, and to discourage every degree of vice and immorality. Founding Father Henry Laurens believed that the goals of the Constitution could not be fulfilled apart from a fear and a respect for God, and that it was therefore the duty of government to encourage this among the people.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Courage is being willing to stand even when you stand alone. It's knowing what the right thing is and having the courage to do the right thing. That's Naftali Daggett. When you look at what we accomplished as Americans, you had a group of guys who had so much courage. Women, wives, mothers had so much courage. They said, you know what? We're going to stand up and we're going to pay the price. We're going to do what it takes. We're going to have the courage to follow through with this because they knew it was right. The third thing I think that makes us exceptional is faith. Because when you look at these founding fathers, they knew what they were about to undertake. There was no way they were going to be successful on their own. They were about to take on the number one military power of the world, the number one army, the number one navy. We don't even have a militia. We certainly don't have a navy. We're about to do something we've never done. We have no chance of success if we don't get some help. And that's why, you know what? They were people of faith because they knew they needed God's help. In fact, when you look back at the Constitutional Convention, great example. Constitutional Convention, they come together to write the Constitution. And as these guys get together to write the Constitution, they have guys from 13 different states, 13 colonies that are coming together. And everybody has their own idea, as you are discovering. Everybody has their own idea of how things should work. And when they came together with 13 different thought processes, they didn't agree on anything. Because New York said, well, this is the way we should run government. And New Jersey said, no, that's terrible. Do it this way. Virginia said, no, that's even worse. Do it our way. And everybody had their own idea. And so for the first 4.5 weeks they were together, they couldn't get anything done because nobody could agree. In fact, it was so frustrating that people said, you know what, this is dumb. There's no point in me staying. I'm out of here. And people began to leave the Constitutional Convention. It was at that point that Benjamin Franklin, who was considered the old man of the convention, he spoke up for the first time. And he said, guys, wait a second. He said, Mr. Speaker, can I say something? He stood up and he says, in this situation of this assembly, groping as it were in the dark to find political truth and scarce able to distinguish it when presented to us, how has it happened, sir, that we have not hitherto once thought of humbly applying to the Father of lights to illuminate our understanding? Why haven't we thought of asking God for help, is what he's saying. In the beginning of the contest with Great Britain, when we were sensible of danger, we had daily prayer in this room for divine protection. Our prayers were heard and they were graciously answered. Now, by the way, he says when we first started this whole thing, we started with prayer, which, by the way, the very first time they got together, September 6, 1774, that's exactly what they did. The records of Congress show the first time they got together, they opened with prayer, and they asked God for help because they knew without God's help, they wouldn't be able to do what they were trying to do. And that's what he says. He says, we had daily prayer in this room for divine protection. He says, our prayers were heard, and they were graciously answered. He said, all of us engaged in the struggle must have observed the frequent instances of superintending providence in our favor. And have we now forgotten this powerful friend? Or do we imagine we no longer need his assistance? He said, I have lived, sir, a long time. And the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs the affairs of men. If a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We have been assured in the sacred writings that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I firmly believe this, and I also believe without his concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. I therefore beg leave to move that henceforth prayers imploring the assistance of heaven and its blessings on our deliberation be held in this assembly every morning before we proceed to business. He said the reason we have a problem is because we haven't asked God for help. In fact, it was recorded after that time. They took 3 days off, and they went and they actually prayed and they said, God, we need your help. They came back, and 6 weeks later, they had written the Constitution, the most successful document in world history. They couldn't get anything done, and all of a sudden, this old guy says, you know what, guys? Remember when we used to have problems and we prayed and asked God for help and it worked? We should do that again. We should go back and ask God for help, and this is where you see an indication of their faith. Because they understood, you know what, there are some things in life that are bigger than you need help with.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Today, there are numerous documented accounts of individual students being disciplined simply for bringing a Bible to school. Fisher Ames would have been appalled at this open hostility toward the Bible. Fisher Ames was the founding father who authored the House of Representatives language for the First Amendment. In his day, he vehemently objected to any attempt to minimize the Bible at schools. In fact, he declared, Why should not the Bible regain the place it once held as a school book? Its morals are pure, its examples captivating and noble. The reverence for the sacred book that is thus early impressed lasts long, and probably, if not impressed in infancy, never takes firm hold of the mind. Founding Father Fisher Ames, the man most responsible for the wording of the First Amendment, believed that the most important school book was the Bible.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
You also have people like George Washington. George Washington, he served for 45 years this nation. In fact, he started off serving back in the French and Indian War. He was an officer with the British. Well, then we separated from the British. Now he's an officer with the Americans, and he's crossing the Delaware here. Or here's a picture of him at Valley Forge. For years, he's serving us. Well, then after the war, he becomes elected as president. He serves 2 terms as president, and after 2 terms, he says, you know what, guys, I've had enough. Let's elect somebody else. We don't want a dictatorship kind of king thing we had going on. Let's get somebody else to be a leader. But one of the things he does when he leaves, he gives his farewell address. It's considered the most significant political address ever given by a U.S. president. And in this political address, he tells them a few keys of success. What he tells them, of all the habits and dispositions which lead to political prosperity, he says religion and morality are indispensable supports. It means you can't do it without them. He goes on and says, in vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars. Now, he served for 45 years. He knows what it means to be a patriot. He says, if you try to subvert the 2 pillars of religion and morality, you can't even call yourself a patriot. Because religion and morality was something they understood was so significant. In fact, just practically speaking, all of the issues and problems, the crimes, the injustices, the oppressions that we see today, generally speaking, comes from a lack of morality. Why do we lack morality? Well, because morality is tied to religion, and you don't get morality without religion. This is why George Washington said, you have to have religion and morality. We understood the things that made us great. We knew, you know what, in order for us to be great, we're going to have to work hard, we're going to have courage, and we're going to have faith. And we did what it took to be exceptional. In fact, I love when you look back at these guys. You know, when you live life with hard work, with courage, and with faith, you just look different. Even when you're young. And I love looking back at these guys when they were younger guys, because even seeing them when they were young, these guys were doing amazing things when they were young. When you're motivated by hard work, by courage and faith, you just live life differently. Great example, Fisher Ames. Fisher Ames, one of the guys who was the framer of the Bill of Rights. We're familiar with the Bill of Rights. Fisher Ames, when he was 12 years old, entered Harvard. 12. Some of us couldn't enter Harvard today, and we're in our 20s. Dude's 12. Or you have people like Dr. Benjamin Rush. Dr. Benjamin Rush, considered the father of American medicine, the most famous doctor in American history. In fact, he came up with medical cures over 230 years ago we still use today. He graduated from Princeton when he was 14 years old. I feel like that's impressive. You guys are looking like, I've done that twice. That's impressive. Okay, you have people like James Iredell. Is anybody in here 17? A few of you? James Iredell, when he was 17, he was placed in charge of the finances for his section of the state of North Carolina. His whole section, 17-year-old, he's running them. You guys need to catch up. You have people like Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson, we know, was a general in our military. He also went on to become president. But when he was 14 years old, he actually was already fighting in the revolution. And at 14, he was captured and was a prisoner of war at 14 years old. 14, he's already been captured, prisoner of war. You have people like Daniel Webster. I love the story of Daniel Webster because Daniel Webster, he actually served in the House and Senate for 30 years. In fact, incredible things he did, a really incredible orator, attorney. But his desk is still in the Senate, the U.S. Capitol. And in fact, you know it's his desk because his name is carved in the bottom. And the reason he carved in the bottom is because they didn't used to have, their sessions were very short. They were just there a couple weeks at a time. They would go home for the rest of the year. And so when he would come back, he said, I want my desk back. That's my desk. So he carved his name in the bottom to make sure he got his desk back.